Welcome to Garden Plants with Jim Putnam. Let's talk Carissa Holly. This is Ilex cornuta Carissa, otherwise known as Carissa Holly. This is a great dwarf, low mounding evergreen shrub. It only has one spine on the end of it. It is a sport of one called rotunda holly, Ilex cornuta rotunda, which has 5 spikes and is kind of a pretty wicked plant, especially if you've ever stepped on one barefoot. So this selection has the beautiful shiny green leaves that you would expect on a Chinese holly like this. It has kind of a yellow edge right on the edge of the leaf that makes it really interesting, and just a great compact, shiny, low maintenance shrub. There's another broadleaf holly called dwarf Burford, and it's a dwarf of Burford holly, but it can get 12 feet tall. I think people might think that's the one that you should use as the dwarf. Carissa is actually like a dwarf of that, and so this one can be maintained 3 to 4 feet in height, even smaller than that if you wanted to, a little bit wider than tall, perfect little low doming mound. These things can creep up to 5 or 6 feet. There's no off switch in them. They do slow down around 4 feet, but they'll continue to creep up if you let them, but you can easily keep them smaller than that. They do flower, and this one's actually got some flowers on it right here, and just like any other Chinese holly, those flowers are actually going to be fragrant. I rarely ever see a berry set on these, but occasionally you'll see a red berry here or a red berry there, but they're not being grown for that like some of the larger growing upright hollies. These are really tough plants. They prefer full sun, but they'll take partial shade. Even I've seen them in slightly deeper shade, but they are much thinner plants. This is one of those plants you don't really need to ever touch if it's in a full sun space. They're hardy in zone 6B and down to zone 9. In zone 6B, you'd probably want them as a foundation plant if you're growing them in zone 6. Everybody else can put them out in open space. I've even in the worst of winters, seen very minor damage on these here in zone 7B. So where are we going to use this little low mounding shiny evergreen? This is a great foundation plant. I had these planted on my foundation at the old landscape for 20 some years. Really virtually no maintenance. I think I cut them back hard maybe 3 times over that 20 years, and they come right back from that pruning. Sometimes I'll see these in commercial settings when really tough places in like parking lots and things like that are really rugged places. I'll tell you, this is a great plant if you have to prevent cut throughs. So if you have people cutting across your property in some spot, the fact that it grows so thick and then it has that little spine, it's not as wicked as rotunda, but it's still there. It will prevent people from cutting through your property. Also, these dense, shiny, evergreen shrubs are great for backdrops for our flowering things. Like most hollies, these are going to want slightly acidic soil, and from there, they're really very tolerant of sandy soils, clay soils, as long as it's well drained. Once they're established, they're incredibly drought tolerant. I never re-watered my Carissa hollies that went into that foundation planting at the old house in 20 years. Never once did I water them. We get pretty regular rainfall here, but we would go months without rain. This is a plant that's just not going to have any problem with that. These can be pruned when you need to prune them, probably coming out of late winter before they put on that new growth would be the time to do that kind of reset pruning on them. I fertilize them once a year, probably really not even that necessary to fertilize them unless they're off color. They have this great, really rich, dark green foliage on them. Not a lot of pests, really. I'll see some scale insects. Anytime you have a plant that's this tightly compact and you're never going to get good air movement through this plant. It is a place where some, scale insects and things can hide. Typically not overall an issue for them. I just keep the weeds away from them, keep them well mulched. So let's talk about the one thing that can happen with this plant though. It can revert back to rotunda, and almost every Carissa Holly I've ever seen that's more than 20, 25 years old will have a branch on it that has that rotunda leaf that has the 5 points on it. When you start to see that early on, this will have it, again, it's a 20-year out. It's a 20-year out issue typically. It's not something to worry about, not something that will prevent me from buying this plant, because this is a great, tough ornamental plant. Not trying to discourage you, but eventually you will see that reversion in them typically. And you need to just go down into the plant and cut it completely out. It doesn't mean it won't try to come back, but it's pretty easy. I had them start to probably 15, 18 years in. I started showing up in my Carissas at the old house, and I just go in once a year and just cut it out down to the bottom of the plant. It wasn't that big of a deal, but that is the one issue you may see in your Carissa Hollies, is them try to revert back to Ilex cornuta rotunda. But this is Carissa Holly, one of my absolute go-to landscape plants for something that I can plant and forget, and then put other interesting flowering things around. Thanks for watching.